we've just come through this Bitcoin Cash network upgrade that obviously has been a big event in the history of Bitcoin the last few weeks and last month. What was your experience working at an exchange and how to deal with that?
Yeah, I think one thing that people find surprising is that exchanges don't sit around waiting for hard fork events on any projects. There are things that every company is working on. But when it comes to something as significant as sort of in this case, a top 5 cryptocurrency forking, and especially this one, which comes from the genesis of last year's fork and the original protocol, it's important that while exchanges have no obligation to offer sort of products that helps create a market in the tokens, it's in the best business practice to be neutral and give that choice to users.
Okay. And what approach did Circle or Poloniex take with this particular hard fork?
Yeah, so what we did as an approach was, my argument was always like, there's going to be economic value on both chains. So whether you give the tokens months and months after, or give it ahead, you're going to have to build the same engineering software. So the short of it was, we decided that, and this harkens back to my experience earlier last year at OKX, and this speaks to the slide, is that during the kind of pre-fork period, you want to give a neutral stance to both technologies. So last year, you see the naming there, it's BCS for Bitcoin SegWit.
Right, so you're talking about this tweet
yes.
you retweeted in 2017. Okay.
That's right, so this is maybe 8 days before the August 1, 2017 hard fork. And OKX launched a product that allows people to kind of pre-fork and split into BCS, Bitcoin SegWit, and BCC at the time, Bitcoin Cash. And then after the fork, it reconverged as a naming, because no matter what your default expectations about how the market will go, I think the fairest way for an exchange, once you've decided to offer both forks, is to keep that neutral. So this year, in the case of Poloniex, we had a similar event.
So now, that's the tweet on the right you're talking about now.
That's right. Okay. A little better looking tweet, I would say. But we offered essentially users the ability to have the choice of either fork, leading up to the event. This is, I think, exchanges are not going to decide what chain is going to win. That's ultimately based on a number of things like users, investors, miners. But exchanges, it's in their benefit. This is not a charity product either. This is in every exchange's benefit to kind of offer this type of product where it suits.
Do you feel any of the exchanges tried to make a decision too quickly?
Yes.
As to what was the winning chain?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't speak for other exchanges sort of directly, but even internally, we have these discussions. Like, lots of projects have airdrops, have forks. I mean, you can't possibly handle them all. Sometimes the exchanges, when they default to the incumbent chain, it's not necessarily a position saying that we necessarily think that's the right way. Oftentimes, when you default to the incumbent, it just means a default. It does not mean that you support the necessary next upgrade. So some exchanges may have taken a view of, we'll take a wait-and-see approach, so we'll just, for now, declare one side or the current side, and then later on, kind of switch it around. So that's how I would read that.
Did you actually have any conversations with people at other exchanges about what approaches they were going to take to this hard fork?
Yeah, so it's interesting. These are not conversations that, in every exchange, there's going to be people who are closely following one particular project or whatnot. Sure. But a lot of the exchanges at this point have scaled to a degree where, if you're an executive at the exchange, you're kind of really focusing on your own customer service, your own compliance. You're not really as aware of what might be really going on in the ecosystem. So I think a lot of exchanges only sort of turned on to the possibility of this fork happening in the last sort of week or two. And that's even these notices, that's when the notices were put out. So this is kind of a urgent, kind of last minute ramp, and that's the feel I got from exchanges. And that's why a lot of them hard to make a decision ahead of time.
Yeah. And can you give us maybe a little insight into sort of what happens behind the scenes with an exchange once you learn of a potential, or upcoming hard fork? What are the kinds of topics and discussions that have to happen, just so that people in this room sort of understand things from the exchange perspective?
Yeah, sure. For a high level, you have to make sure that whatever you're going to announce, you are prepared on a number of security, technology, regulatory, legal perspective. This is the base architecture. And then you have to make sure that your notices are delivered clearly on channels that your users are able to see, because this is very disruptive to your user base, right? Sure. Things are happening, people are confused. And so you're going to make sure customer service is ready to answer a lot of the inquiries coming in. And then more technically, obviously, working with the development teams to make sure that their developers are also working with our developers, that we're very much aligned on what happens to protect the security of user funds.
Yeah. So, as someone who obviously was involved in the fork and the network upgrade from the Bitcoin SV side, I can tell you that what we did was start reaching out to exchanges many, many weeks before I started, a couple months before. And then we sent notices to the exchanges multiple times, asking them, one, to stay neutral, yep, because we felt like we weren't asking them to take one side or the other, and that they should consider suspending withdrawals and deposits to protect consumer funds, and that to be prepared in the event Bitcoin SV won out as the winning chain, that they should at least run a Bitcoin SV node to minimize user interruptions. What's your feeling on whether or not exchanges should be allowing trading or should be allowing withdrawals and deposits during a hard fork period?
Yeah, I think if regulatory-wise is not a concern, I think exchanges try as much as possible. It makes business sense to continue to offer trading. Mm-hmm. This is part of free markets and having a price signal. And then I think it pays for exchanges to be well-educated and well-prepared and listen to those kind of notices that you guys put out, because you don't want to be in a situation where there is only one fork and you've allowed one chain, you let deposit and withdrawals too early. There's a lot of the considerations, so that's what I'm saying.
So can you tell us why Polynex decided to adopt that particular naming convention on its exchange, BCH ABC and BCH SV? Because obviously there were some variations,
Sure, yeah.
Some exchanges calling the ABC fork BAB, some just sticking with BCH.
That's right. So
what went to your thinking?
I would say all these names are kind of pretty hideous. But we knew at the time, but we weren't wanting to be the standard setters, but it just happens because Polynex, we launched it first. The names BCH ABC and BCH SV kind of just was what people referred to for a long time. But I think one reason we wanted to have these names is if you're launching a relatively potentially confusing product that you want to have ultimate clarity on to your user base, and it's relatively temporary, this naming, because ultimately as the chain either exists on their own or one exchange exists, you're going to reconverge coming up to the BCH and BSV names. So these letters are very long, but it makes it very clear that both BCH ABC and BCH SV are coming from the BCH chain, and you have the development team's names embedded. That's the answer.
So I feel like my experience, and I think a lot of people's with this recent hard fork and upgrade, shone this light on this question of what role should an exchange play in the governance of Bitcoin and determining, for example, which is the right chain. Because I'm sure when Satoshi Nakamoto wrote that white paper and the idea of Nakamoto consensus, who knows, maybe there wasn't this idea of, okay, well, some exchange is going to decide who's the winning chain or at what point in time. Do you have thoughts on that, seeing what we've witnessed over the last month? What role do you think exchanges should play?
Yeah, so I think exchanges should be neutral, but at the same time, I think if Nakamoto consensus or any kind of blockchain consensus is to work, you can't depend on all exchanges behaving one way or another. So every exchange, there's hundreds of exchanges today, they're all going to behave differently. And so the exchanges not going to be the ultimate deciders of consensus mechanisms, in my opinion. So this is one of the misconceptions I think people have. I think today we have an industry where exchanging crypto is 90% of the use case.
Right.
And it's very influential. But we would love to see a much wider use case where, today we do have E-Trade, we do have New York Stock Exchange, but we have an entire global economy.
Right. So let's talk about that next. With exchanges, a lot of the revenue that they create obviously comes now not just from the top cryptocurrencies, such as like Bitcoin and its variants, but all these ICO tokens. Do you think that plays a role in incentivizing in either good or bad ways how exchanges deal with both the number of tokens and the pressure, for example, to maybe get trading back going on a fork?
Yeah, I think it's take a step back and see the evolution of sort of the industry. I would actually say that very few entrepreneurs in the early days of Bitcoin set out to say, I'm starting an exchange. This exchange were just one of many, many use cases. There were, I remember people working on merchant adoption, working on wallets, working on developer APIs. There was a wide range of different kind of startups. And in the beginning, exchange were really focused on fiat to crypto on-ramps. And this is a highly profitable business. It was for a long time. And so I would say that the recent 1 or 2 years, I think the space moves so fast, there is no like inherent bias on the part of any exchanges to want to support millions of tokens, speculative tokens, especially if they're not quality. Like at Circle, we have a very strict sort of quality control program. So since we acquired Poloniex, we've delisted more coins than we've listed to kind of clean up sort of the activity. But we have to remember that all these token projects are open source, and they have been since 2009, right? So other tokens have existed even in 2010, 2011, 2012. They just never captured the imagination like it did in the last year. So exchanges are always going to be, obviously, these are businesses that are profit-seeking. So if there is a value on other chains, then you can expect exchanges to list them, just like if there are value on forks, they're going to list them. But as just someone who's been in the industry on sort of both sides of the Atlantic, I think my personal view is there are other players here who could have maybe done more if you wanted to have a sort of more unilateral chain world.
Who would that be? Who are the other players that could have done more?
Well, like we've only get to live out one timeline, right? Which is what we're living in today. But if you blindly gave someone like the original white paper and ask them to interpret sort of what the incentive mechanisms are, then I think miners sort of had an opportunity in a different world to kind of massively scale one chain. You would still have these other 10,000 chains. They would still comprise of a whole bunch of market cap. So I think the longest view of our industry is going to be the same, but we go through these ebbs and flows because we're all learning here, right? We're all experimenting. And so maybe we went through a phase of let's try multiple chains, and now there's a market consolidation. So that's going to be consolidation of companies, consolidations of activity on different blockchains. And then it's up to these companies, ecosystem companies like exchanges, to figure out other business models if it turns out that sort of this blockchain trades against that blockchain business model is not as big.
If you went back in Bitcoin's history, do you think if miners had pushed for a lifting of the 1 megabyte default block size on Bitcoin Core earlier, we would have so many coins now?
Yeah, I would say so, sure, definitely. In their defense, this is an exponential kind of industry. So unless you really understood what was going to happen right away, it looks very obvious now that we could use more scaling. But at the time, this is on a human social level. You were looking at an industry where it didn't say in the white paper that the miners would be in China and the developers would be in the United States. That is not included, right? So I remember back in 2015, 2016, there would be a lot of these summits organized between developers and miners and exchanges. And these are all relatively new companies, all who wanted to be cordial in some sense of decision making. And what would happen if there was 2 coins, or would your exchange list both of them? And listening to developers. So I think if miners at the time had been taken more of an active role in development, it's possible, very possible. We have a very different history.
Yeah. Now it's kind of obviously gone the opposite, where you've got so many tokens and ICOs, and of course exchanges make money based upon listing, a lot of them.
But this should be like a blip in the history of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. We hope, right?
Yeah.
We hope it all consolidates back down to one, but there may be still be more than one.
As I work on exchange, I need to be neutral to all projects, but it's just natural you're going to have kind of some consolidation, whatever chain it ends up being. Right?
Well, given the number of tokens there are out there now in the different blockchain projects, do you get concerned that will make it complicated, even more complicated for exchanges to deal with forks, for example, in the future of these many different projects, if there are more?
Yeah, I think so. But you run a business, but you have to. It can't be that easy to run a business, so you have to deal with that. But really, I think one of the reasons this is getting so much attention is there's not enough scaled use cases for any cryptocurrency at the moment. So everyone just really tracking like what is the ticker of this token and what is the price of on this exchange. If you imagine a world where people are actually using the products, and say what you want about a lot of these like less than stellar kind of ICO projects. In their respective white papers, the objective is not get listed on exchanges and just trade. They have objectives, like they're trying to solve things in the sharing economy, trying to solve things in the environment, with farming, and whatever the use case is. So we need to move our industry towards developing products that can bring those use cases out. And then the users would just enjoy those products enabled by the fact that blockchains are cross-border, are microtransactions, are fast, are instant, are trustworthy. Just like most people use their iPhones and they don't check on a daily basis, what is the Apple ticker and have they have their share split?
Yeah. So today is dedicated to looking at the future of Bitcoin. What do you think is the future role of exchanges, and how will their business models have to change in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you look at long-term kind of exchanges in the traditional markets, exchanges have not just one business model of taking the exchange fees. In fact, those fees, if you look at the NASDAQ, are very, very small, like orders of magnitude smaller than the fees in our today's ecosystem. So exchanges are going to have to, like I said, there's going to be a consolidation into the number of exchanges. We certainly feel like we're in a good spot in terms of regulatory, in terms of our product offering. Exchanges have to innovate. And when I mean innovate, it may not necessarily just mean like innovating within the exchange product. You're going to have to create products or APIs where maybe the exchange is happening in the background to facilitate some of the seamless other experiences. So I think exchanges in many ways become more invisible.
Yeah, because I see a world
global,
where people are not using exchanges so much primarily to buy cryptocurrency, right, or trade it, right? That they're receiving it through other means in life, for example, through payroll, which is how today most people get most of their money, right, is on a regular basis, is through payroll. But if we start getting our money in Bitcoin through payroll, then people have less need to go buy, crypto with fiat currency on an exchange. And so then exchanges need something else to do.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, so what kind of little sort of services invisibly do you think exchanges will have to provide in the future? And how can companies in this room start thinking about that?
Yeah, so I mean, some exchanges are going to, I think there's going to be a lot more different approaches by different exchanges going forward. I think there was so much money to be made last year in the rise of all these tokens that scrapped together a website and put up an exchange somewhere in Asia, and you got a lot of users. And now you kind of see a very commoditized offering. So I think some exchanges are going to focus on their particular country and maybe servicing a different kind of clientele, like institutions. And that's going to require building, a set of like institutional grade custody or a set of high frequency type of offering. And then other exchanges are going to, like I said earlier, have that kind of invisible order book. Some people are going to DEXs. So these are just a lot of different avenues that exchanges are going to offer. But the goal of any of these cryptocurrencies, right, the long-term goal, was not to inspire a new generation of middlemen to constantly earn trading fees, right? Like
Right.
I think
Which is ironic. Exchanges are an intermediary.
Right. But over the long term, I think that's going to change, and no one really needs to champion that necessarily. I think that the gears of the free market is already playing that out.
So I know you can't speak on behalf of your companies, but do you have any personal opinions about the hard fork and Bitcoin SV?
Yeah, so I guess just my personal readings and interest for background, I don't come from exchanges necessarily. I've been working on exchanges the last 5 years, again, because this is an early business model for Bitcoin. But what really got me excited was when I first read the white paper in 2013. I remember really not knowing anything about technology or public key encryption or anything like this. And I ran out, did a Google search after I read the paper, and I found out, like, next to my backyard, basically in Vancouver, there was an ATM machine.
Right.
And this is going to sound very embarrassing, but I put in, like several $100s. I did not know there were other exchanges out there that were cheaper fees, so it's okay, a few $100s. Other people in this coffee shop, I think it's called Waves, were looking at me like, you must be crazy.
Yeah. On Davie Street?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I know
that's right, in
Waves on Davie
Vancouver.
Street.
And then out came out some like receipt, and I just waved it around like, okay, what do I do with this? And people were freaking out, like, that camera on the coffee shop is set up to take that private key. So I think, so that's how I got introduced to blockchain.info, the digital wallet. So I think I come from an economics and finance background in an extreme sense in that way, and I've caught up definitely on the technology sense. So I definitely, as someone who's grown up in China, Japan, Canada, US, Hong Kong, I want to see sort of mentally as my childhood dream of having a sort of a true globalized, at a base layer level architecture for our global economy. So those are things that drew me to the industry, and those are the objectives that I want to see achieved over the coming years and decades.